What's going on, everybody? I'm Scott from ScottHermanFitness.com, and we're here today again with Brian A.K.A, the exercise physiologist on ScottHermanFitness.com. And Brian has another topic he wants to talk about. So Brian, what are you going to talk about today?
Thanks, Scott. Hi, guys. We're going to talk this week about another chronic disease that affects many millions of people in this country. In fact, as many as 50 million people are affected by this condition. It's called high blood pressure, formerly known as hypertension. And Scott, what I wanted to mention, there are essentially two different types of high blood pressure or hypertension. 90 to 95% of all individuals with high blood pressure have what we call essential hypertension or primary hypertension. That, and furthermore, what's interesting about that, so many people have it, yet there's really no known cause for high blood pressure that is essential. Although we do know there are a lot of risk factors involved in contracting hypertension, it's still essentially a condition of unknown etiology. The other type of high blood pressure or hypertension is called secondary hypertension. And this particular form of high blood pressure is actually reversible in many cases. Typically, a person that is affected by secondary hypertension has some type of kidney disease or kidney dysfunction.
Okay. Okay, how can someone like I know if I have high blood pressure?
Well, probably the easiest, most obvious way to know if you have high blood pressure is if you're on high blood pressure medication. And as silly as that sounds,
I'm not on any, so I guess I don't have high blood pressure.
I guess you're cleared. Go out and kill yourself.
Does it matter, I guess, if your face turns really red? Does that mean?
Well, if we talk about signs and symptoms, which is something...
If that's the case, then maybe I do, if you watch my workouts.
Well, there are some signs and symptoms that are suggestive of, but for the most part, and let me get back to the medication thing. It's surprising how many people, I have a lot of patients in my echocardiography business who, when asked if they're on or if they have any particular risk factors for coronary disease, and hypertension is one of them, they won't mention high blood pressure as a factor, but yet when I get into their medication list, they're on some type of an antihypertensive medication, which is hopefully controlling the high blood pressure, but some people tend to think that because they're on medication that they're not considered hypertensive. No, you are. You're just a medicated hypertensive, and hopefully it's well controlled. But technically speaking, how do you know if you have high blood pressure? If your blood pressure is monitored and it's found to be, the textbook value is like 140 over 90, which is 140 is the systolic blood pressure, over 90 millimeters of mercury is the diastolic blood pressure. That number at or above 140 over 90 is considered the threshold for diagnosing high blood pressure. If a person has, I guess to state the significance of these numbers, if you're diagnosed with a resting blood pressure of 160 over 95, you're actually 1.5 to 3 times more likely to suffer other types of or secondary conditions related to high blood pressure, like stroke and coronary disease and even congestive heart failure. So again, the important number, 140 over 90. If you're at a drugstore, at a department store that has one of those automatic cuffs.
Nice.
That's right. Scott, I'm sure you just flex and bust that cuff.
Well, that was the thing. That's what we do. You go to Walmart and you just put your arm in and flex as hard as you can and see if you can stop the thing from crushing your arm.
Or if you put it around Scott's head, it'll probably blow the machine right out the door. In any event,
somebody has to break the machine.
What's interesting, so anywhere you have a blood pressure monitor or a clinic set up, if you have the opportunity, get your blood pressure, because much like diabetes that we spoke of a while back, a lot of people have high blood pressure but are unaware of it because it's essentially a disease that is in which you're asymptomatic. So there's no obvious signs. You know, you joked about face getting all red. some people that may have a predisposition to high blood pressure or who are already diagnosed as hypertensive may show those kinds of signs. But the average person walking around that has no known heart disease, no known high blood pressure, won't necessarily think of, red or flushed face as being a precipitating factor for high blood pressure. So even though a lot of people have high blood pressure and a large number of people don't have the condition diagnosed yet, most of the cases of high blood pressure are discovered through casual blood pressure monitoring. Like you decide that there's a health fair and you get your blood pressure done and voila, it's the first time you find out you may have a blood pressure condition.
Well, with that in mind then, are there other risk factors? For example, is it something that is hereditary? Can I get this from my parents?
Yeah, interestingly you can. There are some genetic, I guess you might say, flaws that would may predispose you to hypertension if it's in the family. But most importantly, this is a lifestyle-related disease, and some of the typical factors that are related to so many different types of chronic diseases, like heart disease, are the same factors, same conditions, lifestyle habits that are involved with high blood pressure. That is, smoking is a risk factor, obesity, and the concomitant sedentary lifestyle. These are all risk factors of contracting high blood pressure.
And not watching all the videos on youtube.com/Scott Herman Fitness is a huge risk factor because you don't know how to exercise.
Absolutely. So remember, let's jump that to the head of the class, guys, and that is that failure to watch ScottHermanFitness.com is one of the major risk factors for the development of hypertension. That's what we're talking about.
So obviously, exercise is a huge part. Mm-hmm. So what can we do for exercise management to help if we have high blood pressure, if we want to avoid high blood pressure? What's the best kind of stuff to do? Yeah,
exercise has a real important impact on keeping blood pressure manageable. Whether you're an undiagnosed and you're trying to prevent high blood pressure, or you're a diagnosed hypertensive and on medication, exercise plays an important role. Typically, exercise professionals focus on doing exercise that is of lower intensity and longer duration. Mostly the aerobic or cardiovascular types of exercises are the ones that we generally steer people to, because higher intensity usually exacerbates the blood pressure condition. So we try to we try to keep people away from those higher intensity activities or exercises.
And exacerbate, just make sure it makes it worse, correct?
Thank you, Scott, for clarifying.
Brian has a great vocabulary. I'll keep it on the DL with you guys.
Unfortunately, Scott's a walking thesaurus, so without him here, I'd be garbling all kinds of junk words and really not knowing what they mean. But thanks, Scott, for pulling me back from the abyss.
You're welcome.
Let me talk a little bit about the types of exercise that's best. Let's talk about an exercise prescription, if you will.
Okay.
Since we mentioned how important endurance exercise is, I'm going to give you all some general guidelines on what is the best type of exercise to do and how much, how often, that sort of thing. We recommend for a hypertensive, they should be exercising 5 to 6 days a week. So again, exercise is vital, it's important, and it's a necessary component of managing high blood pressure, and certainly important in the prevention of high blood pressure. So 5 to 6 times a week is the number of times we'd like to see you exercising. And the intensity, which is probably the most important component of this workout. And one should be exercising at a level consistent with 40 to 70% of their maximum age-adjusted heart rate. Furthermore, each session, 5 to 6 days a week, for 40 to 70% of your age-adjusted max heart rate should be in the range of 30 to 60-minute sessions.
Now, would this also include weight training? You say cardio, so weight training, I would think would be really good too.
That's right, good. I'm glad you mentioned that. We certainly don't want to discount the importance of strength training or weight training for management of high blood pressure. Strength training is important. It's something you should utilize in a total fitness program or workout. I would recommend, ideally or primarily for a hypertensive, to focus on the type of strength training or weight training format that we refer to as circuit training. You want to tell our watchers and listeners a little bit about...
Well, circuit training is basically doing a little bit of everything in one day. And what you want to do is you want to go, if you're in a gym facility, you can go on the YouTube channel, look up the Cybex machines. The Cybex machines is actually a full circuit where you're doing arms, back, shoulders, legs, chest, a little bit of everything in one day. And that's what you want to do. And you want to do probably like 10, 12, 15 repetitions per machine. You can go through a whole circuit of about 13 machines at once. You can do 3 sets per machine and go one by one. You can superset, do 2 machines at the same time. So do a set here, set here, set here, set here. Take a break, then go to the next 2. Depending on your level of intensity and how long you've been training will determine what kind of circuit training you're going to do. But as long as you're hitting each machine and hitting each part of the body, or it doesn't even have to be machines, it can be just individual exercises as well. That's circuit training.
Good. Thanks, Scott. Great advice. And furthermore, with conventional type strength training, with machines, free weights, that sort of thing, we certainly don't, we certainly want you to get involved if that's the type of strength training you prefer. That's fine too. Just remember, keep it simple, focus on lower intensity, which means lighter weight, lighter load, and higher volume. So more sets, more reps, lower intensity. That's the ideal way to work out with the weights when we're talking about exercise and blood pressure.
And you can also do stuff at home as well. And we'll be having more exercises posted on the site that you can do at home. Because if you don't have to leave home, if you don't have time to leave home, well, it's great to do stuff at home. Especially in front of the TV when there's a commercial on. Just to get you to do something will get you there. So, now, what are then some other points to consider? We covered the cardio, the weight training, the risk factors. Are there any other points that we should consider?
Well, it's important, like any type of illness. Most people, certainly if you're diagnosed hypertensive, you're on some type of a anti-hypertensive medication. A couple of the classes of medications that are most common for the hypertensive are beta blocker medications and diuretics. 2 things to consider with each class of medication. If you're on a beta blocker does a couple of things. Ultimately, its goal is to lower the workload of the heart, so it makes your body work out or work under an environment that's not quite as stressful. But to the lay person, to the untrained person, in simple terms, what a beta blocker medication does is it lowers your blood pressure and lowers your heart rate at a given intensity. So Scott, who's very intense, and we have to believe that he's not hypertensive, if he's exercising, say, if he's running 10 miles an hour on a treadmill, we may see his blood pressure at around 160 over 80. Now that's an exercise. We make that important distinction. When we talk about diagnosing high blood pressure, and I gave you numbers earlier, 140 over 90, and I gave you another example of 160 over 95. These are numbers these are readings taken at rest, okay, while you're sitting here, like you and I, doing mind games. Okay, of course, his blood pressure is a lot higher because it's the inferiority issue with the mind. I don't want to go down that road right now. So when you're exercising, the typical response of the cardiovascular system to exercise is a linear response to the intensity of exercise. Would you like me to simplify that?
Yeah, I would.
Scott,
simplify that.
You do seem to be in
a
a bit of a fog.
That was one of these.
Okay. I don't know if the fog, you've been in the fog ever since you got here tonight, Scott. I don't know if it has to do with your girlfriend issues or it has to do with...
I was editing videos, editing more videos for you guys.
Yeah, I think he was a little scared coming in tonight. Anyway, so back to the linear relationship. The harder you exercise, the higher your blood pressure goes. And while you exercise, it is a normal thing for your blood pressure to rise. That's typical. As I say, in a linear fashion. The harder you exercise, the faster you go on a treadmill, traditionally or typically, theoretically, the higher your blood pressure will rise. Hopefully it only rises to a certain level and doesn't exceed it. But so the point is that while you're exercising and you're on a beta blocker, your heart rate and your blood pressure response to a given intensity won't be quite as high. So if we put Scott, who's not on beta blockers suddenly, asked him to run on a treadmill, and he's running 10 miles an hour, his blood pressure might be normally, without the influence of a beta blocker, maybe as high as 160/80 at 10 miles an hour. On a beta blocker, you might see his blood pressure only 140/80 at that same level. So it's going to keep your blood pressure blunted or reduced during a given intensity of exercise. Same thing happens with your heart rate. So if you're used to using heart rate monitors or you're checking your own heart rate during exercise, remember it is dose dependent, but beta blockers by and large will drop your heart rate at any given intensity about 10 to 20 beats per minute. So medications, know what medication you're on and realize that it does have an impact on your exercise and your body's response. The other class that I mentioned of antihypertensive medications are the diuretic class of meds. So I think generally people understand what a diuretic is and what it does. It causes the body to lose more fluid. So if you're exercising over a prolonged period of time, or if you're in a warmer or more humid environment or climate, make sure that you're well hydrated, because that can certainly run into, if you're dehydrated because you're on a antihypertensive medication, that may be an issue.
All right, well then I guess I have one last thing for you. Are there any precautions that we should worry about?
Yeah, there are certain things that we consume, that we eat or drink, that do play a role and do influence our blood pressure response day to day. Alcohol has an effect. Typically, alcohol will raise your resting blood pressure, so a person who is hypertensive should moderate their alcohol consumption. Sodium, people talk about salt as being a four-letter word, a bad word. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, salt does not cause high blood pressure. Salt does influence your blood pressure, but will never cause it. So that's why health professionals recommend that you limit salt or sodium intake. Other things to consider, NSAIDs, which is a fancier term for it's a anti-inflammatory medication like an ibuprofen.
Yeah.
There's plenty of different brand names that we're not going to plug because they haven't paid us a promotional fee to advertise their product. But we're certainly willing to take you on. But in any event, so certainly
Black Label Productions. We'll show you the box. Put a black label over there.
So any of these medications that people use typically to treat injuries, they may also have an influence on your blood pressure in a bad way. Decongestants, certain cold medicines also can raise blood pressure. There are products now that don't have the certain chemicals in them, the antihistamines, that do have an influence on your blood pressure. So those are some of the things to consider. A couple other things, back to exercise and the strength training type of exercise that a lot of people have heard of and a lot of people utilize. That's isometrics. Isometrics are something that you should not engage in if you're hypertensive, because an isometric exercise constricts your arteries. When you constrict your artery, it has a secondary effect to raise your blood pressure. So stay with the isotonic type exercises, which free weights, machine weights are geared toward. Stay away from the isometric type exercises. And lastly, something that I alluded to earlier on, and that is, I can't say enough about the intensity factor. Keep the intensity of your workouts, or if you're involved in some highly competitive sports or activities, it's probably you ought to learn to gear it down a bit.
Excellent. Well, that was a great wealth of information for you guys. Now you're educated on hypertension. How do you feel? Good? Do you feel good?
Oh yeah, my blood pressure
I feel
just
good.
popped right through my head.
How do you feel, Cliff? Do you feel?
Awesome.
All right.
Cliff feels great too. Well, thank you, Brian.
All right.
So what do you think about talking about next week? Any ideas yet?
Scott, I'm still trying to digest what we said tonight. I can't think that far ahead. Thanksgiving's coming up. All I'm thinking about is feeding my pie hole. So that's all I got to say.
Well, we hope all you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe to the videos if you want to see some more good stuff. Brian's going to have some more good stuff coming too. And keep the lookout. We're happy to have you, and we're happy to teach you. See ya.